Good morning, or good evening. The first thing I think I'd like to say is whoever it was that selected the invocation, that was just fabulous. It was just perfect for my message. And also, I applaud y'all's courage, because not only are you a stand for being an open and welcoming place, no matter what anyone's sexual orientation, but the fact that you invited me to speak and printed in the bulletin, thank God for the new atheists, certainly takes some courage in Oklahoma City. So I thank you for that. My wife, Connie Barlow, who's in the back, and I have been living on the road for the last 8 years. We've traveled North America nonstop. That's all we do, is we travel and we speak in churches, and mostly churches, but also environmental organizations, and just every kind of religious and non-religious group that you can imagine. We've spoken to almost 1,100 different groups in the last 8 years. We've permanently traveled North America. We don't have a home. And our passion is sharing the 14 billion year epic of cosmos, earth, life, and humanity in ways that inspire people religiously. So what we do is we take our best scientific understanding of reality and we see that as divine revelation, that science is revelatory. It's revealing divine truth. That God didn't stop revealing all the cool, important stuff 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. That God is revealing truth today through evidence, through historical evidence. And after having done this for 7.5 years, I was diagnosed with cancer back in September, and I underwent 6 rounds of chemotherapy. I had a tumor the size of my spleen, the size of my fist in my spleen. And I underwent cancer treatment and then went through chemotherapy and then had my spleen removed. And now my hair is growing back all curly, which is really kind of weird. I've had straight hair my whole life. But the day that I was diagnosed with cancer, I asked myself if I have one message left to communicate, because I thought I could die real soon. And I asked the question, if I have one message left to communicate, what would it be? And what came to mind was, preach the new atheists as God's prophets. Now, my first response to this was, you've got to be kidding. The theists will run one way, the atheists will run the other way, and both of them will be running for the barf bag. I couldn't understand how I could possibly have a message like this that would communicate, that would actually reach anybody. But it's also become one of the core things I've been speaking about since I've recovered, and I just was tested, I just had a CAT scan done about a month ago, and there was no sign of cancer, so I'm hopeful at this point that I'll live some time longer. But this message to the new atheists, or why I'm grateful, why I thank God for the new atheists, is real simple. That the new atheists are playing the role that has traditionally been played by a prophet. A prophet, I'm not used to standing behind a pulpit, so I'm going to probably speak up a little bit. Prophets traditionally have been those who saw what was real and what was emerging, and then spoke a word of warning to the people that went basically like this: get right with reality or else. We need to align with reality or suffer the consequences of not doing so. Sometimes it was as bold as, get right with reality or perish. And of course, the biblical prophets, we see this in other traditions as well. And of course, usually God language was used. People spoke about reality in personified ways, because we find that in all cultures all over the world. God has always been no less than a personification of what was undeniably real. Reality itself personified. Imagine, do you remember the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, where he personified the soccer ball as Wilson? That's the only thing that kept him sane. Right? That's what human brains do. We will naturally, inevitably, and we have in all cultures. Brain science, neurobiology, the study of anthropology, the study of different cultures, the study of different religious traditions and mythologies, all point to the fact that we innately personify reality. And we use God language. That's one of the reasons why there's so many different stories of gods and goddesses all over the world. It's not like God has a multiple personality disorder or, schizophrenia. No, these are different personifications of reality. And so the new atheists, what happens is that we tend to make idols of our concretizations. Notice we make an idol of the metaphors that we use. So one culture says God is Father. He's not mother. Other cultures say, no, God is lover or friend. No. And so we argue about our different metaphors for reality. And we see this in the Bible. There's dozens and dozens of metaphors within the scriptures themselves, in the Old and New Testament. And yet what many people have not factored in is that the church, the American church, is shrinking, just like it did in Europe. And not just the liberal congregations. Even the evangelicals are losing 1,000 people a day. And one of the reasons when we ask young people, there's been surveys, why are they just not finding religion attractive? One of the things is because the biblical view of God interpreted literally forces us into a position of a God that many young people don't feel that they can even respect, much less worship, if you take it literally. For example, the Old Testament, if you take the morality of the Old Testament literally, you'd be forced to conclude that sort of the basic morality is obey the Lord or die. In the New Testament, it's believe in Jesus or fry. And yet, according to the United States Department of Defense definition of terrorism, if you look at just our government, the way our government defines terrorism, this is a direct quote. Violence or the threat of violence to inculcate fear, intended to coerce or intimidate others in the pursuit of goals that are generally religious, political, or ideological. Now, we all know that God can't possibly be a cosmic terrorist. And yet, if you interpret the scriptures literally, that's the conclusion that many people come to. It's one of the reasons why new atheists, and when I use the phrase new atheists, I mean those best-selling authors that are not cutting religion any slack. They think they're attacking religion, but what they're actually doing is helping religion evolve. Because everything in the universe is evolving. And if our cultural traditions don't evolve too, then we get stuck with outdated understandings that no longer become life-giving. We start thinking that God spoke only to shepherds and goat herders and farmers in the distant past, and God isn't speaking to us today. And so the new atheists are basically saying, I think they're helping us get real about God, to get real about guidance, and to get real about good news. And so let me just sum these up in just a brief moment. Helping us get real about God, because God is not a supreme landlord who resides off the planet and outside the universe. God is not, some being out there who blesses some and smites others. That's a trivial notion of God. God is a sacred, holy, proper name for what is fundamentally real, ultimate reality. And of course, reality is more than anything we can know, think, or imagine, but reality is also present in every drop of experience, in every interaction, in every breath, in every pulse of our heartbeat. That's part of reality. And so the new atheists, paradoxically, are nudging us to get real about God. They're also helping us get real about guidance. Where does divine guidance come from? Where is God's word for us today? Is it only locked up in books that were written hundreds and thousands of years ago? I suggest to you no. That yes, as inspiring as many of those texts are for us, that God is revealing truth through every fact. I say facts are God's native tongue. God speaks through evidence, through cultural, cross-cultural evidence, through scientific evidence, and through historical evidence. This is a God that's as active today as ever was in the past. And then finally, the new atheists are helping us get real about good news. The gospel, God's great good news. The words supernatural and unnatural are synonyms. Did you know that in the whole history of the universe, the only place that the supernatural realm has ever existed, in terms of what we know evidentially, the evidence suggests that the only place that the supernatural realm, quote unquote, has existed is in the minds and the hearts of human beings, and only quite recently. There's been anthropological studies that the concept of the supernatural didn't exist until we began to have a concept of the natural in a scientific way. And it was only after we understand things in a factual, natural, measurable way that some people began to think of the need to propose a supernatural realm that is beyond nature. Human beings have always spoken about reality in day language and night language. Day language being the language of our everyday experience, and night language being the language of our dreams, of fantastic things. If we could do in our dreams, literally, what we dream about, we'd all be having supernatural experiences every day. In fact, supernatural is unnatural, if you take it literally. Supernatural is by definition unnatural. Anything supposedly supernatural is unnatural. Now, when I suggest that the New Atheists are helping us get real about good news, I mean, does this sound like good news to you? An unnatural king who occasionally engages in unnatural acts, supernatural interventions, sends his unnatural son to the earth in an unnatural way. He's born an unnatural birth, lives an unnatural life, dies and is unnaturally raised from the dead, lives for 40 days appearing unnaturally to some of his followers, and then zooms off to heaven to sit on an unnatural throne, be back with his unnatural father, and to unnaturally judge the living and the dead. To redeem us from an unnatural curse brought about by an unnaturally talking snake. And if you believe in all this unnatural activity, you and your fellow believers get to go to an unnaturally boring paradise for an unnaturally long time, while everybody else suffers an unnatural, torturous hell forever. Now, if that's supposedly the gospel, is it any wonder that young people are leaving the church by the millions and that the New Atheists are writing bestseller lists?